Thursday evening, everybody. My name is Colin Livingston. Welcome to Talk and Torque. This is going to be a fairly interesting evening or a fairly interesting episode. At least I think it's going to be interesting. Going to do a little bit of memoriam for the loss of TSN 1260 radio here in Edmonton. Put a blog post up earlier this week, and want to just kind of not necessarily read it out to you, but just kind of go through the content and kind of tell my story as to how I got into it and why TSN ended up meaning so much. Um, to me, the connections that I made, the friends that I made, and what it means when now that that station is gone, because well, for me it's a little bit inconvenient, and personally it makes me sad. I really enjoyed doing my little radio segment with Jason Greger. But I came to know a great number of the people within that building. I started with the group at the Bear, the local, one of the rock radio stations here in Edmonton. Largely when I got introduced through the Bear Morning Show at the time, which was led by Paul Brown, Yukon Jack, and Jillian Foote, and that goes back, I don't know, probably 10, 12 years ago. My in-laws business had bought some ads with the Bear, and back in that time, the radio, the media business was a lot more appreciative and a lot more dynamic than what it is today. As a small token of their appreciation, the Bear Morning Show went to their sponsors and went to their advertisers, and basically dropped off a small present, gave them probably about 30 minutes of FaceTime, and just said thank you, which was super cool to get to see the faces of the people who were on the radio, and the people who had been promoting your company and your products for so long. While they were, we shared a building. So my in-laws business was called Campbell Automotive, and my business is Cantork. And we're in the exact same space. We had different addresses even, but while they were in the building, Mark, my brother-in-law, brought them over and introduced me. And, I had a quick chat with all three of them. It really struck me as how dynamic and energetic all three of them were. Their personalities were really captivating. Flash forward a little, few months, and the salesperson, which was for the company, which was Astro Media, before Bell Media had actually bought everything up. Mark Stevenson paid me a visit, and he didn't mean to pay me a visit. He came to see Mark, and he didn't know that they had sold their business and they were no longer in this building. But while Mark was here, just kind of picked my brain about what Cantork does, and had I ever thought about radio ads, and so on and so forth. And at the time, I had always had a real interest and a real fascination with radio. It was always in the back of my head that somebody, when I was a kid, and I can tell you exactly who it is. It was my friend Joe Hudipol's mom. Told me when I was a kid that, and as I'd started hitting puberty, that I had a great voice and I should really consider doing something in the radio world. And that always festered in the back of my head. When Mark came in, as in Mark Stevenson, to pitch my brother-in-law, and ended up kind of baiting the hook with me, it was it kind of fulfilled that that destiny. Now, the other point, and this is something that I mention in my blog, is that the building that houses CTV TV, which was CFRN, the Bear, Virgin Radio, and TSN 1260 was called the Sunwapta building, the part of Sunwapta Broadcasting, which I knew as a kid, and it was really significant because it's on the west end of town, and as Edmonton exists now, it's well within the city. It's still kind of on the edge, but it's you know, there's buildings on either side of it. There's, mega centers and all the rest. But when I was a kid, the road, Stony Plain Road was what we would drive in to get into the city. And that was the first building that we would see. There was nothing else. There was no Anthony Henday. There was really nothing even in Winterburn. That was the first thing. And we would often listen to what was, CFRN 1260 was the radio station when I was a kid. And it was always captivating to me that I could look at the building and know that the sounds that we were hearing in our car were coming from somewhere in there. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know a whole lot more other than that, but it was always, beyond fascinating to me. And not again to go verbatim, but I had no idea that at some point I would actually be introduced into that building and actually broadcast, and I would be the one making the sounds, when, once I got a little bit older. So, those the fulfilling of destiny was really cool for me. We did an awful lot in there. I have a lot of fond memories on the Bear side of things. Knowing that for the most part, I could just not necessarily pop in, but we could arrange to come in. We brought, through my association with Alex, he was always a fan favorite during the Edmonton Indy. Later, with the NASCAR Pinty's race, whenever he was in town, we could always get over there, which, sometimes I'd get on air, but, more than anything, it was just really cool to be in the studios. It's a short walk from where the Bear studio is, through the halls to the other side of the station to where TSN was. But it was always super cool to see, the soundboard, to see how everything gets produced. And another thing that really struck out, I didn't mention this in the blog, but when we did the first hit with TSN, it was with Dusty Nielsen and Will Fraser, with Lieutenant Eric was somewhere in the background. But I had heard Dusty's show a number of times, and on air, Dusty sounds like a moderately normal guy. But when we were in person, I couldn't get over how loud he was. And he wasn't yelling, but he was just really dynamic. And the way that the mixing was able to kind of take his voice and just kind of turn it into a normally delivered sound, also like equally fascinated me. But I recorded numerous, Cantor commercials in there, working with producer Chris, just such a great guy, always able to squeeze a bit more energy out of me. One of the things that they teach you when you start voicing, and obviously I'm not a broadcaster, I am not a professional voicing person. I'm just fairly passionate as an amateur, but they teach right away that you have to speak smiling. You have to smile because that energy actually translates to the recording. And you have to feel like you're over the top. And, while I've learned a little bit more of how to enunciate and how to, punch certain words and talk in a certain way, in general, if we ever talk face to face, I'm a fairly monotone, flat person. So when I feel like I'm kind of going over the top, I'm really, really, really just in first gear. And you have to feel like you're Bozo the Clown, zany, wacky, to get the energy across. And Chris was always great at squeezing that out of me. Um, then there was a lot of things that happened kind of in the background with my ads. My advertising spanned mostly on the Bear, which is what I was listening to, and then we with that package we got ads on TSN radio. Through that, I started doing a little bit of reporting. I'd go to a big race like the Indy 500 and do a 5-minute hit trackside, which was super cool. Then eventually did more on-air interviews, which led to um, me often getting co-interviewed when Alex would be in town. I had a little bit more legitimacy. Then things, again, things in the background, made me question my spend. We had kind of done what we had needed to do. A lot of the morning people had moved on. Obviously Uke is still very active on the morning show, but Jillian's gone, Paul Brown's gone. Locker, the way that Locke was dismissed, I got to see kind of face to face, and I got to see firsthand, and that was really my first real exposure to how cold and how cutthroat that business can be. And while I do understand the the media or the parent company wanting to protect their air, that if they telegraph to someone that they're not going to be around, if you give someone notice that they're not going to be there in a week or a day, or this is going to be their last show, that lends it to either them pulling the energy out of their show, or worst case scenario, to sabotage. And there's a lot of times where there's a lot of video clips where you'll hear someone just mother f the company, tell them about how they're getting fired and all the rest. I understand all of that. If you take a look at a career broadcaster like Lachlan Cross, he's in this market. He is ingrained here now. He couldn't mother F his way off the station and then expect to ever work anywhere else. But, I understand it. I just didn't like it. And it really sucks when I have to see, people I like, or people, more than anything, people that I respect, have to go through that kind of thing. And short version is that led to me ending my advertising with the Bear. At that point, I had stopped listening. I'd kind of moved into more of my own music and satellite radio, and I wasn't really a customer of that station anymore. And shortly after ending my ad space on the Bear, I got a call from Jason Gregor. Now, Jason, if you're not in Edmonton, Jason, has a real um, uh, unique position there, or at least he had a unique position, because Jason was never an employee of any of those stations. Jason was a contractor, and while I'd be normally hesitant to mention this publicly, Jason wrote about it in his thank you letter, and his closing comments. But Jason he paid for his time, so his show slot was from 2 to 6 Monday to Friday. With that, he had to go out and he had to attract his own advertisers. He had to, have people paying him so that he could afford his space, and then, in turn, pay for guys like Jason Strudwick, Connor Halley, and make a living. And with that, Jason gave me a call and said, "Hey, listen, I've heard what you've done." And Jason and I had met a handful of times. I'm very open about the fact that, the first couple of times I met him, I didn't like him. I always felt that I had to reintroduce myself. And while I wasn't a real important person, and, arguably still am not, Jason had been to my shop. We had been to, numerous events, and I always felt like he never remembered me, and I always got this impression that he had a bit of an attitude, and I'm convinced that he felt the same way about me. But when when it came down to it, and the I'll flash forward and get back to the main point of the story. I've come to know Jason very well, and I know he is beyond an excellent human being. His show does what's called the month of giving leading up to Christmas. Over the last 13 years, they have raised over $2.3 million that have gone to various charities. He came up with a program called Gregor's Grads, where they work with local suit and tuxedo supply businesses to arrange for suits and formal wear for underprivileged kids who make it to graduation but wouldn't be able to afford the clothing. Just outstanding things. I've needed Jason as a friend, and he was always there. And I like to think I'd reciprocate. But that being said, didn't always have the best impression of him until I really got to know him. And once we did, and he approached me for this idea of capitalizing on my position within racing to do a little 20-minute segment once a week. The rest, as they say, is history. And I was surprised because I actually had no idea. Timelines often confuse me, and I don't have a great perception of time. But it's almost 5 years to the day that we started doing the Cantoric Race Report. And what was the very coolest was that for the most part, up until COVID, I was able to just go to the studio, which is only 10 minutes from my office, and we could do the show in person. We could have that face-to-face interaction that brings a lot more energy to the broadcast. Eventually, when COVID hit, that made things a little bit more complicated, but we made it work. And eventually, I ended up with all this kit because, well, the guys had no comment, no even influence to say, like, listen, it doesn't sound that good, because they're used to having guests call in by phone. I hated the sound that we got when I was on, and oftentimes, and it's no coincidence that the cell program that I had for a number of years was with the parent company that subsequently shut down TSN radio. But my phone would echo. So as I was talking, I was getting my words bouncing back to me on like a half-second delay. So it is indescribably distracting to hear yourself. And I just kind of played that back in my head, which made me hesitate. But eventually figured out with Connor how we could work this so that we could go connect over Zoom. And all of a sudden, the sound was good. The show, I think, was okay. I'm sure people hated me or liked me, or just didn't want to hear about racing, but that's fine. Got a number of great questions over the years, got a lot of great inquiries. I know we've brought a number of people into karting over the last few years, or brought them to the racetrack just to see racing for the first time. And started doing this well in advance of Drive to Survive and things like that. That being said, really just feel terrible for the people who have lost their livelihoods. Whether it's guys like Matt Iwanek, Tyler Yaremchuk, some of pre-departed, but there's a lot of people that got that had the carpet pulled from under their feet. The thing that makes no sense is why they chose that day at that time, when they could just have easily ran the programming out through Friday. When they go to syndication, they could have called everyone, they could have emailed everyone, they could have dropped the bomb at night, had a weekend to kind of chill out, let everyone kind of process things. And then, when the majority of listeners tune in on Monday morning, then you find out that things are gone. People have had a bit of time, but clearly the company that advocates so strongly, or claims to advocate so strongly, for mental and emotional wellness doesn't ever seem to offer that to their people, and that's about the last word that I'll leave with that. Um, Really super impressed and super inspired that in the face of this kind of crisis, all of the people that I know so well over there, whether it was Dusty, Low Tide, I can't say that I know Low Tide all that well, but I've met him a handful of times, and he's just a great guy. Strutty, Gregor, Connor, all made these super thoughtful, very well crafted thank yous because their thought was as much for the listeners as it was for themselves. Obviously, there's a self survival that has to happen, and they need to figure out what their next steps are. But none of them went bitter. None of them besmirched their former employer, and did such a great job. And I know that the options that they're going to have, whether it's internet, whether it's podcast, whether it's another radio station, whether it's something else, it's going to turn into the next best thing for them, and in time they'll be able to look back and say that it was a move that they were never going to make, but once it was made, it turned into one of the best things. So really looking forward to seeing what's next, hoping that somewhere down the road the Cantork Race Report um, will return, whatever form that's going to be and whatever medium that's going to be. And until then, I will likely take this platform, and we'll try and cover a little bit of what we're going to be doing until such time as Gregor gets to his next position, or we figure something else out. That being said, we see we got a few people watching. I'm not really watching all the social medias. Just a little inside info here for anyone that's watching. If you can watch on YouTube, you can actually interact with what we're doing. I've got a couple of comments. Our old friend Mike Baker, he throws a lot of good comments. He's a good friend. He's a great listener. I know he's watching on YouTube, and because of that, he can throw comments at us. We can throw them up. We can respond back to them. If you're watching on the other socials like Twitter, we won't see any of the comments. So if you can, if you have the option to watch, youtube.com/Cantork, we'll be streaming live, or through Crier Media. Doesn't really matter. But that being said, anyone that's actually out there, what did you think of last week's racing? F1, we finally had the Canadian Grand Prix. Interesting to say the least. Not exactly the best showcase for Bell Media, who now owns the F1 race. Just an absolute shit ton of technical issues. CCTVs went down, which canceled FP1, delayed FP2, then it turned into a monsoon, then there was a whole bunch of other stuff. What did everyone think of that? IndyCar ran at one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the best road courses anywhere. Road America, Road America, Elkhart Lake. Again, make the comment all the time and stand by the comment that everyone seems to like new watchers of racing got in because of Drive to Survive, and Drive to Survive really features Formula One. Formula One is the top dog as far as dollars spent, as far as the level of technology, the speeds of the cars, the cornering ability of the cars. But F1 doesn't produce great racing. I can, it's not even a prediction. We know that unless something catastrophic happens, it's the next race at, back in Europe is going to be won by Max Verstappen. The only contender is going to be Sergio Perez, with an outside chance for Fernando Alonso. We know Mercedes is getting a bit quicker, and hopefully they're going to be back in the mix. But the outcome is predetermined. There's not a lot of on track passing. There's not a lot of on track action. And if you pay attention, if you're a new viewer of Formula One, you're going to hear a term quite a lot, and it played out on the weekend of DRS train. And what a DRS train is DRS is the drag reduction system. What that in certain portions of the track, if you're following a car within 1 second through the detection spot, you get to open up a flap of your rear wing. That will reduce the drag of your car, allow you to go faster, to compensate for the lack of downforce that you have, and it should facilitate more passing. And what ends up happening is cars will catch a car, they all get DRS, so they're able to stay stuck together, but they have a really hard time passing the car in front. And you get a number of these packs where there could be 4 or 5 cars within 2 or 3 seconds, and not a lot happens. Excuse me. It's not the most entertaining thing to watch. Conversely, go to an IndyCar race, watch an IndyCar race. While the names might not be as familiar because they don't get the same coverage as Formula One with Drive to Survive, there's not a lot of backstory, and any of the 100 Days to Indy or any of the features are not widely available. They're not shown on Netflix. They're not shown where everyone can see them. They're on select networks. But notwithstanding that, you watch an IndyCar race, you are going to see passing. And last weekend's example from Elkhart Lake was one of the toughest examples and the most brutal challenges that these guys have had to try and pass anyone. And they were passing people every lap. The track was recently resurfaced, which meant that anything outside of the main groove where all the rubber gets built up had no traction. And when you see a guy like Will Power drive his car off the track with no influence, you know that it's difficult. Will is as good a driver as IndyCar has right now. Scott Dixon made a mistake. Countless drivers drove off the track at various points because the margin for error was literally inches, if not smaller. That if you started getting your car out of the groove, you just started to lose traction, and by the time you lost it, it was so hard to collect it back up. And even with that, IndyCar was able to put on a race where there were numerous passes, and you didn't really know until towards the end of the race who was going to win. Really tough to bet against Alex Palou right now because he is in the best form that he's ever been in. He's a strong driver, but going into the weekend, you can never know who's going to win. And that's the exciting part, is watching how a race unfolds from practice to qualifying. IndyCar's qualifying is really quite entertaining with, starting with 2 packs and then getting into a fast 12 and then the fast 6 for the pole. It really keeps things entertaining. Just loved it. I mean, personally, I thought it was fantastic. The last half of the show here today, we're also supposed to be getting a couple of random guests. I've opened it up to my counterparts of the Off Camber Carters group. Don't know. I've only got one response back from one driver, but hoping that we see a few faces pop up here in the on the screen here, and we can go through last night's karting action. A very, very busy race for sure. There was some on track contact, which is always a bad thing. We don't participate in racing for the crashes, although a lot of people will say that that's why they watch racing. But really, kind of goofy night the way it started. That normally we run qualifying from 5 to 6 o'clock. It's open. You can run as many laps as you want. I've said it a million times and I'll say it again. Sorry, I'm going to get back to this, but I want to address what Mike throws up here because Mike is a bit mistaken, unfortunately. Mike's talking about bad pit call for Colton Herta, who had led a big chunk of the race, suggesting that they made a bad pit call when he was he was make sure I say this the right way. After their final pit stop, which happened about 15 laps to go, he was told that he had to go into fuel save mode. So when you go into fuel save mode in an Indy car, you're able to turn down the engine so that it's not as powerful. But the other thing you do is instead of driving to the absolute break, like the absolute threshold of where you can stop, you have to lift probably 150 feet, coast, then slow down, and then you have to accelerate as normal. What happened was not a bad pit call. They had an issue with the fuel delivery. Is they didn't get enough of their fuel into the car. I think they made the right call, but unfortunately, once they made that pit stop, it wouldn't have mattered if they came in with 13 laps to go. They short fueled because of an issue with the fuel delivery system. They could have potentially waited until a little, like they were already getting towards the end of their fuel run anyway, so there wasn't a lot more that they could do. And once that fuel delivery issue happened, their race was done. Colton had to lift and coast and went from having really the fastest car that was there, having to settle for, I think he ended up fifth. See if I have the results here, but anyway. Which is also really cool, that we're getting really close to the I shouldn't say too close, but we have one race coming up at Mid Ohio next weekend, and then the following race will be the Toronto Indy, the Honda Indy at Toronto. So that's going to be awesome. But as I was saying, getting back to the go-kart world, driving go-karts, where the conventional misthinking is that the go-kart does all the work. Drivers are not athletes. I mean, I won't claim to be an athlete. I'll joke about it, but it takes a lot of physical force to operate a cart. You do 10 laps in a go-kart, you can burn, probably in 10 laps, which is about 8 minutes, you could burn about 200 calories, 250 calories. It is a crazy, crazy, crazy physically difficult thing to do. That being said, when you get to qualifying, you want to get enough laps in so that you feel like you were at your best, but at the same time, you don't want to wear yourself out because we run 3 heats in the night, a 10 lap followed by a 10 lap followed by a 12 lap. And while that maybe sounds like a lot, I promise, or it doesn't sound like a lot, I can promise you it is, especially when we only have a small break between heats. You come off the track, you have to go through scales, you have to refuel your cart, make any adjustments based on what your cart handling did, if you sustained any damage, things that you have to fix, things that you have to modify, and try and get a quick breather. I mean, the gaps between our sessions are really, between 20 and 30 minutes, depending on what the night's like. Once you get to that, you're right back out on the track and back to super, super high intensity, training for another, 10 to 12 minutes. It's a lot. But last night we didn't have timing and scoring because the timing loop and the connection back to the tower was flooded with all the rain that we've had here in Alberta the last, whatever it's been, 10 days. So not a lot of people went out on track. It was decided that we were going to start the night based on point standing. We have 2 classes. So we have a class of 397-pound drivers, which is, 397 is the weight of the driver, equipment, and the cart. Not, we don't have a lot of 400-pound people that race go-karts. And then we have a heavier group at 420 pounds. By default, the 397 people got to start up front. We, as 420-pound drivers, started in a pack behind, and then all of our rookies. which really made things a little bit interesting. By definition, that should have been the running order. 397 should always be quicker than a 420. 420 should be quicker than a rookie, and we should have been able to stay out of everyone's way. Just before our heat one kicked off, it was the timing came back, so we were going to be able to run without a whole lot of issue. I started 24th because I've had a couple of really weak races. I've missed a race. So my point standing was I was basically the last car on the grid to start by points. I had the rookies behind me, and I had a lot of carts in front of me to start. Heat one, there was a lot of chaos. We have a couple of particular drivers that can't seem to get it through their head that this is not Formula One. This is not IndyCar. We are not making our livings doing this. We're supposed to be out there having fun, making very reckless moves, which one particular driver I won't mention names because I don't want people to feel bad, but if you're watching, and you'll figure out that I'm talking about you. There are a number of moves that I've seen this driver make that the only reason they didn't result in a collision was because the other driver, the overtaking driver, made corrective action. If they would have held their ground, the move that this guy was making would have resulted in a collision, similar to that of the move that we've talked about a whole bunch with Patricio O'Ward. Trying to first at Long Beach, trying to make the overtake on Scott Dixon, made a move that if he tried that move without Scotty D to his outside, he would have crashed, and he proved that at the next race at Detroit when he tried on I think it was Ferrucci. Ferrucci backed out. There was no way that O'Ward could make the move. Ended up driving into the fence and ending his day. And that's the kind of move that I saw the last 2 weeks out of this one particular driver, which ended up he ended up causing another collision in the second heat. And then I'm not sure if he was given any kind of reprimand, but in the final seemed to make some aggressive but more reasonable moves. That being said, went from 24th, I think, in the first heat. I finished 17th, which I was moderately happy with. Second heat, started 17th, made it up to 12th, which I was really happy with because now I was really racing the carts that I was in. I was really in the fight with. I had moved up after the second heat to the first in my category, which at the end of the day, I'm not racing the 397 people in front of me. We have separate points. So if I'm the first of the 420s, but I finish as the first of the 420, I get 420 first points. If I finish second on the track, I still only get first points for 420. So there's also a bit of common sense that goes in that if there are 397 drivers that are trying to overtake me, I don't need to spend a lot of time fighting. But that's also a lesson that a lot of people have a hard time figuring out. But in the second heat, I ended up with a flat tire. I have no idea how it went flat. I haven't found a single issue. I put the car on, we check our tire pressures every time we throw the cart on track. My tire pressures were fine. Somewhere on the formation lap, I could feel that something wasn't right. I thought maybe one of my wheels had slipped. Once we got to driving, I knew I was in trouble. And by about the second lap, I had thought I need to pull off. Something's going to break. I'm just going to hurt my tire. I'd probably be better off. And then I'm doing the math in my head as I'm driving around. Like, I just worked to get to this position. If I pull off, I'm going to have to pass all these guys again. So maybe I can fight my way through it. Maybe I can get through. And somehow, while I did get past, I still managed by the end of the second heat. I was the first 420, made a tire change. And by the time we got to the final, cart was driving great. had a lot of fun, was able to, I was actually able to drive around some of the 397 drivers. If you've ever heard the radio show that we did, one of my favorite drivers who's moderately new to our series is a young lady now. Well, she's always been a young lady, named Devin Gellings. Devin and her parents, Eileen and Trevor, are very good friends of ours. We do a lot of racing together, and we have a lot of fun because it's still some of my prouder moments when Devin joined us. She was a very accomplished racer, had raced in senior max and run in Briggs for years, so she knew what she was doing. Um, but getting into the DD2 that we run was a bit of a challenge. And in the beginning, she and I raced an awful lot, and during the radio show, it was one of the fun things for me to joke about was that I got beat by a 16-year-old girl. But I would have nights where I got to beat her, and we turned it into a bit of a running gag. And last night, I was actually able to drive around Devon, which is the first time I've been within about 4 carts of her in about a year. So that was fun. And what the comment I made to her at the end of the night is the worst part about passing her is that I didn't have a radio show to make fun of her the next day. So this medium will have to do, and all of our dozens of listeners will will have to suffice. And this is probably a good time for one of my favorite sound drops.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
But good night, all in all. I ended up winning my group. I set the fastest lap in my class, and now we've got a little bit of a break before we move to the EDKRA Summer Challenge. EDKRA is our home track, our sanctioning body, and Summer Challenge is the biggest event that we hold every year. Fun event, lots of prizes. We get great turnouts, and it's one of the great crossover events because our group runs on Wednesdays. The majority of our members at EDKRA run on the weekends, and this is one of the times where we get to share the track and we get to be just treated like everyone else, and get to interact with our counterparts. So this is going to be a fun, super fun weekend. For me, this is, and for most of our off-camber Carter's DD2 drivers, it's really cool that we're going to be racing over a couple of days. Again, our schedule on a Wednesday is really compact and really intense. That we do a heat, we get a small break, we do another heat, small break, and then the night's over at 8:30. Where on the weekend you will you get a 5-minute warm up, and then you're off track for an hour or two, and then you get back out and you can do a little bit more. So, get back to do a little bit more conventional racing, get a little bit more interaction with the rest of our EDKRA counterparts and some of the people we don't get to see all that often. And then, of course, there's a little bit of socializing that happens in the evenings, but not too much because we have to be responsible when we get back to the track the next day. And nobody wants to be driving around someone with a hangover or worse. So always a lot of fun, but not too much fun. Since it seems like even those that kind of committed can't seem to connect or didn't seem to find the time, we'll maybe try and line up the OCK roundtable for another day, and try and schedule it a little bit better. For everyone who tuned in, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Again, if you can connect through YouTube, that works the best for the interaction. You're always welcome to send the comments, send questions. You can get to me, at Talk and Torque on Twitter. You can email heythere@talkandtorque.ca. I will answer every question. I will respond to every email that comes in. And this weekend I almost shit the bed and totally forgot that I'm actually leaving here in a few hours. I'm going to be getting on a plane here to hook up with Tag. We run the NASCAR Pinty Series this weekend. Head back for our second chance, our second trip to Avondale, Newfoundland. Be running on the Rock this weekend. Looking forward to seeing what Mike James and all the guys out there have done. The first year's race, was not without incident. Was thrown together very last minute. Now the guys have had a year to prep and to learn from the first year. So really looking forward to getting back out there. Always great to see Mike. Really great crowds. We have great interaction. The fans during the autograph sessions, come up with a lot of great comments, a lot of great jokes. But yeah, it would be flying through the night, get to St. John's tomorrow, and we race Saturday, and turn around and get back home Sunday night and try and get into work sometime Monday morning. But like I said, please don't ever hesitate. Send me a note, send me an email. You can hit me on all the socials, and look forward to seeing everyone again here next week.